Guys. Hey, this is Matthew, and we're going to be looking at chapters 3 and 4 today. So chapter 3 is all about creating some simple lists with HTML, and chapter 4 is going to be introducing links. Two things that are really, really important for your future web efforts. The truth of the matter, in my opinion, is that lists are really, really valuable, and you're going to be using them a lot for a variety of reasons, whether it's just um, organizing your content. But the other thing is that, in the future, a list is actually sort of a simple template for a menu. But without using CSS cascading style sheets or advanced coding methods, you can create a simple list, of course, because you can embed a link within a list. So for example, you could have a home page, an about page, a contact page, or you could um, create a simple website menu with a list that you could place at the top of your HTML page. So there are a couple different types of lists, actually three, of course. That's what it's showing here. But I think the two that are most important, not to discount a definition list, but the two that you're going to be using, or I still use constantly, even these days, is a numbered list and a bullet list. And of course, I use those in HTML, and I use them with design in general. So if I'm creating a PDF, even for the PDFs that you've seen in this class, I'm always trying to list and organize content and information for you all, because it highlights the information so that your eye will sort of be drawn to it. That's the power of a list. Just going to run through here. There are two different types. Again, I was just talking about the ordered list. No, actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. We're just going to talk about the ordered list here, but first you have to call out the type of list that you're going to be creating. So OL is the tag, and then you need to create list items that are embedded within the OL tag. So you can see the first one in, last one out, and then you have a series of list items that will render with just this chronology 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's how you would create an ordered list. An unordered list is basically the same thing, but instead of doing the OL tag, you're going to use the UL tag, so unordered list, which essentially means you're just going to have some bullet points sitting next to your list items. And it's really as easy as that. The definition list is, again, in the same vein. I'll let you guys go ahead and review those notes. It does get, I will warn you, it does get a little bit complicated with nested lists, because you have to really pay attention to how that nested list is nestled in to your previous list, if that makes sense. So this might require, you can see like the list item has an opening here, but it doesn't have a closing like the previous one. And instead of having a closing, a new list is embedded. So again, here's the opening. It doesn't close yet. Actually, it doesn't close until down here. So here's the opening, pastries. Then you have this nested list, which is unordered with an opening and a closing. And then the previous list is going to close. So you have to really pay attention to that I guess the logistics or the details with a nested list, and they are quite handy as well. Lists are very, very simple, but very, very handy. So the next thing I want us to talk about is chapter 4, links. So let's see, I'm just kind of browsing through the textbook a little bit here. So there's an A tag, and then there's an href, which is kind of showing where the link is going to, right? So the destination. And then there's the text of the link itself happening here. So this is basically the anatomy of an href tag. The opening, the closing, the href, which is indicating the destination, and then the text or the clickable text that the user is going to be focused on if they want to go to a different website or whatever. Let's see. Here's an example, and they're actually sort of priming you just a little bit with what we were just talking about creating basically the analogous qualities between a list. So here's an unordered list and the way that it can be a clickable menu. All right. And this could be a menu that's going to different pages, but it could also be going to in-page links on your resume or CV. Hint, hint, hint. So maybe you have a clickable menu at the top of your CV that a hiring manager can, for example, click on your education, your experience, your references, your skills, etc., etc. So, but I think it is a good idea for you to start thinking about the list and the menu with these links in combination. Okay, whether it's going to a different page. So, for example, within your experience, if you were working at Nike as a graphic designer, Nike has a website, so you can create an Ahref for that particular experience item on your resume, and you can actually make Nike an active link that would go to a new page. So here's the other thing. You can make text clickable or linkable, and you can make these guys going to other pages within your website. So you can see index.html, of course, as we've learned, is always home. And then about us.html, movies.html, and then contact.html. So again, there's that menu, unordered list, ahref analogy that's going to be that you'll see again and again in this book and course. So here again, they're creating a makeshift, very raw kind of menu, but that's how it would go. The real thing to keep in mind here is they're talking about pages on the same site. So you can make these other pages that are within your project folder. You can create a new HTML page with about us content, a new HTML code page with content regarding movies, your favorite movies, and then a new HTML document with contact information, maybe an email or a link to your social media. But this is sort of the beginning skeleton of how you would set up a website within a project folder with multiple HTML files that are all clickable and linkable. I think this is really important because, again, I was just kind of hitting on it a little bit, but directory structure. So before you even start creating like a larger website, you can start mapping out how you want your website to look. Like, what pages do you need? What would be the ideal user experience for someone going to an art portfolio website or design portfolio website? And sometimes it's handy to look at examples or precedents. So if you have ideas of illustrators, artists, designers, whether it's a design firm or a freelance designer, folks need to represent themselves online. So you can sort of follow their template or their example by viewing what kind of pages are these guys creating and how are they setting up their web presence. So I would encourage you to do that. But yeah, there is structure and the relationships that occur between these pages for a real good, solid user experience. I'm always talking about a project folder. So, I mean, here it's called Example Arts. So I think they're making a movie website, sort of a media-based movie website, but yours could just be, your portfolio website. And of course, there's the index.html, which is your home. And the browser, again, is always going to the browser will always go to index.html first. So that's your home base. And then from there, you can set up these other links to additional pages. As long as you set up the path correctly, like, usually I would set up like an about.html page or contact.html page. I wouldn't put them within folders. I would just put them right next door to each other, but it looks like this particular structure has these additional HTML pages within these other folders, and that's okay. But just to kind of give you a heads up that they're just trying to show you how a project structure might look. The thing to really keep in mind is that I think an images folder is pretty common, so that, for example, when you're dropping images into your website, they're all located here. And of course, when you're creating that path, it has to be images/logo.gif. So yeah, you have to be really sort of mindful of how this structure is set up, because if you don't have the appropriate links or the appropriate path for those links and for those images, then essentially your website is not going to work properly, and it's going to be quote unquote broken. You can see that they're doing it right here. Look at examplearts.com/images/logo.gif. You don't always have to add the examplearts.com, because remember, by default, the browser is going to be looking next door to the index.html. So really all you need is /images/logo.gif. You don't need the URL of the website itself. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, I'm going to say this one more time. The browser is always going to the home base first, which is index.html. And then from there, it's going to look for all these other items that are associated with your website. Relative URLs. When you're linking to a page on your own website, you do not need to specify the domain name. Excuse me. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Relative URLs are in-house links. So again, going back up, aboutus.html, movies.html, contact.html, or where to go? Here it is, images/logo.gif. I mean, it's not a hyperlink, but it is a path. It's a local path to a source. So in a way, I kind of feel like that's sort of a relative link as well, because it's in-house, it's within your project folder, it's within your control. That's a relative URL. I think this is a pretty important page too. Remember, I'm talking about the path, and you have to be really mindful of the path in order for things to work properly. So right next door, the same folder. So index.html right next door is the quote unquote same folder. So again, there's no folder preceding reviews.html. But these children and these grandchildren, look at how they're creating movies /DVD/reviews. And essentially these are folders that are located within your larger project folder, where you're organizing content or information. And again, that structure that you set up at the get-go is really, really important. It's just, I guess it's the thinking and planning portion of web design, writing it out, thinking about how you want it to look. The planning part, like thinking about the logical structure of a project website and how things can sort of be organized. The way you might want to think about it is, well, if If you're working in a design office, intuitively organize the information so someone else can also sort of follow your lead, and they'll hopefully and possibly agree with your design decisions. By the way, this is design. When you're making decisions like this, design is organization of information, um, and this is a system. This is a system of ordered information that you're responsible for setting up at the get-go, so that things will operate down the road a little bit a little bit more efficiently. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, keep these folders in mind, and how you can write an Ahref to find the information within those folders. Obviously, you could put everything just next door to the index.html, but then your project hierarchy and structure would just be kind of insane. So that's why we're making these folders. Setting up a simple email link is pretty simple. And what this will do is it will launch the default application or email application that all computers come with. So whether it's Microsoft Outlook or, on an Apple, I think it's just called Mail. But in any case, this is something you need to be wary of, though, because these days, we all experience it at a pretty insane level in this day and age. But spiders are crawling websites looking for this type of information, extracting that information, and then selling it to other companies, so that that's how you end up getting a lot of spam. Is personal information is being sold. So for my circumstance, for my portfolio website, I would never put my personal email or even a business email publicly on a website. I just would not do that. There are other ways for folks to reach out to you. And in fact, I think social media is a really good avenue to do that, because they're blocking spam. They're very relatively careful, I guess, dependent on your perspective with personal information. But you can, instead of directing folks to email you directly, you can direct folks to go to your Facebook page or your Instagram page, and then they can message you from there. So this is a handy thing to know, but in a way it's kind of a deprecated way of solving a contact issue because of spam, basically. Opening new links in a new window. Okay, here's a user experience issue. You never really want to take anyone away from your website or out of your website. You really want to keep them there. You want to keep them on your website, reading content, scrolling, looking at information. And I'm bringing that up because Google is actually tracking a lot of information about you and your website. So they know how long a user is on a page or on a website. They know how much you're scrolling. They know what you're clicking on. They have very in-depth ways to gather information about how folks are behaving online. So if you don't use this target blank, that means that someone is going to click on a link and it's going to take them out of your website. You don't want that to happen. So that's why this target is a really important target or move that you can take. All right. So yeah, again, you don't want to take folks away or out of your website. You just want to show them a new page on a new browser window that would pop up. So opens in new window. So that's a very important thing. And sometimes you do want to do that. Obviously, you don't want to use the target function if you're sending someone to, I'm going to back up a second. If you're sending someone to the about.html or the movies page on your website, then you do not want to use this target function that would open up a new window. But for your CV or resume, if you're going to state that you worked at Nike.com and you want to make that text Nike clickable, then yeah, you don't want the user to be taken away from your CV or resume, but you do want a new page to open up that goes to Nike.com. This is really, really handy and kind of tricky. And so I would encourage you guys to work this out. So this, again, is a method for you to, it's also introducing IDs, which is very important down the road, by the way. These IDs are these little hashtags, and it's also, it's stating the ID, so ID equals top. But yeah, you're creating these clickable in-page links that aren't going to a new relative page within your website that you've created, like about.html. And it's also not taking you to Nike.com. It's just taking you to a different location on your CV or resume or whatever document that you're working on. But you could see that this is actually an opportunity to create possibly a little makeshift menu on your CV or resume. So this could be introduction, experience, references, email, whatever, so this is how you would be able to create on-page or in-page links on one HTML document. And it can be a little bit tricky, all right? But I think if you're able to do this or bust through this wall right here, then you're making pretty good progress with HTML, okay? But believe me, this can be a little bit tricky. I also wanted to mention one other thing. Sometimes be careful about copying and pasting HTML code off of a PDF, because sometimes these little marks that surround, right? See those little quotation marks? Sometimes they're curly. If they're curly, it's going to cause you some technical issues and things may not work. So make sure you type those in manually, okay? Don't just copy and paste. And specifically from the PDF notes that I'm giving you, don't just copy and paste them. Make sure you actually plug in or type in manually those quotation marks. If they're curly, they're not going to work. If you're typing them in, they should just be completely vertical little ticks, and you'll see the difference. So yeah, you can also link to a specific part of another page, which is kind of interesting. This is getting really, really technical and intense, but it might be worth your time and trouble to do this. But yeah, this is a really good page right here with valuable information. I would give this a shot for sure. It's also just introducing the ID, and the ID is very important as we move forward after we introduce CSS or cascading style sheets. So I believe that's probably why this is being introduced at this point. So yeah, there it is. I also wanted to mention, if I open up, I'm working on some notes for you guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up those notes. I have, the rule of thumb while you're working is that you should have your HTML file opened up with your HTML editor, but you should also have that file opened up with whichever browser you're comfortable with. So there we have both of these documents kind of right next door to each other. So you can see here's the H1 corresponding to Web Design 1, and you can see how it's a little bit larger. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating some notes for you all in an actual HTML document. And so the reason why this is kind of handy, I'll tell you why. When I was doing HTML full-time webmaster work, I found myself doing a lot of the same things over and over and over again. And that's one of the things I kind of want to hammer into your heads is that HTML, this, we're not exploring anything new here. This has been around for quite a bit of time. And it really hasn't changed a lot either. All right, I mean, there is HTML5 and things have kind of like modified a bit, but like an unordered list, I think is pretty consistent. So anyway, like H tags, H3. So what I used to do, what I used to have, I'd have a cheat sheet. I would have a document with an unordered list or an ordered list, a definition list, a nested list. So I would have these sort of locked and loaded code examples that I could hit Command C, copy, and then I could just paste into other documents or website documents that I was working on. So instead of sort of constantly typing in this information that is pretty much the same over and over and over again, you start creating cheat sheets for yourself for things that are useful. I would advise you to do that. So actually within my project folder, 1 second, it's the wrong one. You can see here's notes/HTML, and I've actually created a notes.html file. And I've also created an images folder because I needed to set that up in order for students to actually see that it's working. So you can kind of see, we haven't started talking about images yet, but we are talking about paths. You know, for example, about.html. But if you had this HTML file living in the images folder, it would be images/about.html. So again, you know, here's my project folder, kind of. I'm creating a sort of a mini website for notes that hopefully will help you guys down the road. All of these are just examples. Here's the target blank that we were previously discussing. Here's the default email launching code. The other thing I want to mention is check this out. The book, I don't think discusses this specifically, but I think it's very important. Sometimes you're setting up an Ahref, and but you don't know exactly, ironically enough, or surprisingly enough, you don't know what the link is because maybe a client hasn't given it to you yet, or someone in the office hasn't given it to you yet. So what you can do is you can set up a temporary link with just a pound sign, believe it or not. So that works. That's a temporary. And here again, I've plugged in these manually, and so they're just they're not 100% curly. But you know what I want to show you guys? Bear with me for a second. So here's that web design PDF that I'm betting that you guys have a copy of. If you scroll down, you can see that I am giving you some notes, but I wonder, I'm going to try to grab this curly Q. I'm going to just to warn you guys, if you do try to do this, look what happens. Look at, I just broke the website by using a curly Q instead of manually typing in the quotation mark. So you're going to run into errors if you just copy and paste that code that's on that PDF. And I'm just giving you a warning to prevent a little bit of frustration on your end. If you're wondering why things aren't working, HTML has a little bit of flexibility, but it is a very rigid language. You have to do everything almost perfectly. You have to be very, very attentive to details. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. But really, in my opinion, in art and design and most things, attention to detail is pretty darn important. Okay, so we've talked also here, There's the email link, new window link. Here we go. Specific page location links. So there you go. There's the code for what we were talking about, I believe in chapter 4. And I chose a couple movies that I like, you know, Alien 1979 and Pulp Fiction 1994. And in the next 2 chapters, we're going to be talking about images and we're going to be talking about tables. So we're slowly just kind of adding more skills, more HTML skills that allow us to modify our CV or resume. But that's it for now. Thanks, guys.